This could have been prevented. You can keep the worms out of your tomatoes without insecticide, and it works on stink bugs too. It's easy to do, and best of all, it's cheap.
All I have needs, I have not provided.
I was making my daily rounds in the tomatoes, and I honestly didn't know that the tomatoes were far enough along to attract the moth that lays the egg that makes the worm that eats my tomatoes. So I lost a couple of tomatoes already. This is my protection. It works. I did a real short video about this, and I'll leave a link at the end of this video so you can watch it. It's only about a minute long. But this netting comes from Joann Fabrics. Cutting in here, sorry about that. But I found out that Joann Fabrics no longer carries this netting. But I did find it at Michael's online. And it's actually a better price than Joann Fabrics was going to charge. But when you order online, you have to spend $50 to get free shipping. I didn't want to spend $50. I didn't need anything else. So I went ahead and paid the shipping, and it still came out to be a better deal than what I would have gotten at Joann Fabrics. Michael's is cheaper and they ship fast. I ordered on Tuesday. I'm expecting it tomorrow on Friday. It's inexpensive and you use it year after year. That's what makes it so cheap. I've used this stuff for as many as 5 or 6 seasons. So what you're investing now is going to last a long time. I don't know about where you live, but stink bugs are a real problem here in Central Florida. They hide in the tomato plants, and then I guess they need the water in the tomatoes and they sting them. They're not laying eggs in them, they just sting them with a proboscis. It's gross, I know. The only equipment you need are some clothespins, the netting, and your tomatoes should be staked. But if you don't stake your tomatoes, you can also drape this across the top of your tomatoes. I've got some that I'm trying out that way. We'll see if that works. But there is a method to this. So let me finish getting the netting up on the other side, and I'll show you what the trick is to keeping the stink bugs out of your tomatoes. If you stake your tomatoes, this may be a little bit easier process. I did that last year on one of my beds and it went really quick. And it was easier to control the netting around it. So I'm going to have to remember that next year. I may or may not switch while the plants are still fairly young. But at any rate, I have got to buy more netting because if I don't, I'm not going to get tomatoes from the plants that I didn't cover. When you order your netting, get the widest you can. Just pay real careful attention to the description. You want the netting to have a little bit of overlay on the bottom, but you also want it to meet at the top. The moths are pretty clever. They'll figure out a way to get in at the top, but the stink bugs are geniuses. They'll crawl underneath and they'll find any little hole and get in there. And even when you think you've got it all battened down, you still have to inspect and see if there's any hiding up in there, because sometimes they find a way in there even though you've been real careful. So once you've got the netting in place, you're going to have to weight it down. So what I'm doing is matching up the edges here, and I'm twisting it so that they can't get in between. So I'm kind of running real tight at the bottom, so I can't twist it as much as I would like, but I think it'll be enough to thwart them from finding a way through the top. So here's a funny story about a hornworm. If that big mama moth can find where a leaf is next to the netting, she's going to lay her egg right through the netting. So you've still got to inspect your tomato plants every day. Look for poop, little tiny dots that are brown, and you know they don't belong there. You better start looking for a worm, because I'll guarantee you that means that you've got a worm in there, and somehow Mama Moth was able to lay her eggs through the netting onto your plant. Over the years, I've bought a couple of different kinds of netting, and there's one that's a whole lot better than the other. I'm going to show you. This here is very fine tulle. It works, but it only lasts about 2, maybe 3 seasons. This here is a hardier net. It's not really tulle like this. This will last you many seasons. For me, out here in the hot Florida sun, it will last as long as 6 or 7 years. So there's not any price difference. You might as well get the stronger netting. This normally would have been 1, 2, 3, and it's done. But I ran out of netting, and I couldn't figure out why, because I bought some last year, and then I remembered they're covering up my strawberries, which are still producing, and I don't want to share my strawberries with the birds. And this netting keeps the birds out of your strawberries too. So, as I mentioned, the stink bugs are very clever about crawling in underneath, and that's why you do not see mulch around my tomato plants, because they use that as a means to get inside. So you got to go around and secure the bottom where they can't get in. I've used all kinds of things to secure the bottom. Old dishes, pieces of wood, anything that you can find to make sure that this bottom is down where they're not going to fit in underneath it. Did you notice this gigantic tomato bush here in the back? Well, let me tell you about this guy. This is an Everglades tomato plant. I don't need to cover it because the moths don't care about it, the stink bugs don't care about it. It is the most amazing native tomato plant that you can think of. Great for Florida hot summer. It will grow right through the summer. It's very prolific, and it loves our sandy soil. I put this yardstick out here so you could see how big one plant gets. If you live in Florida or even Georgia, southern part of Alabama, I highly recommend it. Everglades tomato. As I was editing this video, I realized I forgot to tell you something. That netting works great for squash and cucumbers, but there's a difference in the method that you use. You're going to cover them up at night before the sun goes down, because you're protecting them against the moths that lay the eggs that turn into worms. Then you're going to uncover them in the morning so that the pollinators can come and pollinate all your squash and cucumbers. I ran out of netting, so what I used here is some shade cloth. You can even use sheets, because all you're doing is covering them up at night, and it's not going to hurt them to be covered at night. Just remember, before you go off to work or whatever you do during the day, as early in the morning as you can, when the sun comes up, take that covering back off of them. And don't forget to cover them up that night, because I've done that before, and it only takes one night, and those moths will find your cucumbers and squash.
All I have needs, I have not provided.